I've never seen such an absurd protagonist. Even without full effort, a casual wave of his hand sends a helicopter weighing dozens of tons skyrocketing. If he exerted his full strength, he could instantly kill a boss that others couldn't defeat even as a group. However, today, the protagonist Kyosuke, pretending to be a novice, got captured and imprisoned intentionally. Why did things turn out this way? Just earlier, he stood alone at the top of a pyramid and performed a free fall from thousands of meters high, then single-handedly fought against tens of thousands. After defeating the soldiers, he mocked the barely surviving ones. Meanwhile, in a certain prison, numerous inmates began betting. They were used to spending their time with free fighting, and it turns out all the inmates here possessed supernatural abilities. The prison had a way to restrict their powers, making them no different from ordinary people. The warden, watching Kyosuke being captured, was excited. The young man had just secured his 7th consecutive victory. He has a unique pair of eyes, and his reward for this victory was a piece of chocolate. Suddenly, the sound of a helicopter echoed in the sky, a treatment usually reserved for the most ruthless criminals. Hearing it, the warden and everyone gathered in the courtyard. The person who emerged was Kyousuke, who started by mocking them. He is a well-known member of the notorious P.A.N.D.R.A organization. Of course, that's how the lower officials see him, but they don't know Kyosuke is actually the leader of that organization. But since he's here, there must be important matters to handle. So, even though others beat him, Kyosuke didn't speak. However, his silence didn't mean he wouldn't resist. He would retaliate through his actions. Just then, a boy with different colored eyes stood up to plead for him. Kyosuke took notice of this. The boy's name was Hinomiya. Normally, Kyosuke wouldn't care, but those unique eyes intrigued him. Just as the officer who had beaten Kyosuke was about to interrupt him again. This device frightened Kyosuke. The prison could suppress his powers, yet others were even more terrified. Here, no one could use their supernatural abilities, but Kyosuke could still manipulate a helicopter out of thin air, landing him in solitary confinement. However, Kyosuke was not alone. Hinomiya was with him. The two felt an instant connection upon meeting. Kyosuke promised to recruit Hinomiya into his ranks after escaping, though Hinomiya doubted it, as no prisoner had ever escaped from this prison. That night, the warden discussed with his subordinates how to deal with Kyosuke. During lunch, the chef took the opportunity to sprinkle poison into Kyosuke's bowl. Kyosuke saw through this but wasn't surprised. Instead, he passed the poisoned meal to Hinomiya, who ate it without hesitation. Then, the afternoon's free fighting competition began, with Kyosuke present and even placing bets. Predictably, Hinomiya was severely beaten and ended up clutching his stomach, unable to stand. That's when Kyosuke informed him about the poison, but also assured him not to worry. The hospital Hinomiya was to be taken to wasn't really a hospital, but a research institute, which was Kyosuke's actual target. Recently, a comrade of his had been captured for human experimentation, according to his organization. Rescuing Hinomiya was just a side objective. Soon, they arrived at a secret room, which was the 3rd superbody experimentation site, and the place Kyosuke's associate was held. Voices echoed from a square container. Just as Kyosuke attempted to rescue the individual, the warden brought a monster to the scene. This creature had been created from numerous prisoners, selected for their ability to transplant superpowered brain cells, and crafted through countless experiments into a super killing machine. Kyosuke found this pitiful and prepared to kill the enemy instantly. However, he hadn't anticipated that the monster was immune to supernatural powers. Moreover, it had merged telepathy and precognition, meaning it could predict his moves. All of Kyosuke's attacks were foreseen. The warden laughed as Kyosuke was beaten. By chance, Kyosuke fell next to a little girl and noticed experimental marks on her hands. Hinomiya was shocked by what unfolded. The once formidable monster was instantly killed. Afterward, Kyosuke resealed his powers. Then the three of them ran to an open area. Kyosuke touched the air casually, and it began to crack like a wall. Behind it, a huge ship's cabin appeared. Hinomiya realized this was a form of spatial camouflage on a large scale. For a moment, Kyosuke seemed incredible in his eyes. It turned out this was the headquarters of the P.A.N.D.R.A organization. Kyosuke granted freedom to all the prisoners in the jail, including Hinomiya. Despite his companion's warnings, he even took Hinomiya aboard the ship's cabin. Kyosuke is the leader of the P.A.N.D.R.A organization, and this ship serves as the living quarters for its members, all of whom possess supernatural abilities. Hinomiya, considered useless, often becomes the butt of Kyosuke's jokes. However, although he appears ineffectual, Hinomiya is actually a bona fide investigator. His mission was to infiltrate Kyosuke's stronghold and gather evidence of their criminal activities. Unbeknownst to the others, before officially accepting Hinomiya as a member, Kyosuke needed to determine his supernatural abilities. Thus, experiments were set to begin. Not only that, but superpowered individuals within 5 meters of Hinomiya experienced dizziness. Kyosuke felt as if he had found a treasure, knowing that Hinomiya's power affects the DNA of superpowered individuals. This means that no one can use their powers near him. However, Magai spotted an issue. Hinomiya's ability should limit everyone's powers, so why would Kyosuke keep him close? Thus, Magi remained skeptical of Hinomiya. That same night, Magi expressed his concerns to Kyosuke. He saw Hinomiya as an undetectable presence and couldn't verify his background. Expecting Kyosuke to dismiss him from the ship, he was surprised when Kyosuke decided to include Hinomiya in the next mission. The mission involved selling valuable antiques hidden by Kyosuke's organization in a remote city to its influential figures. The journey wouldn't be easy, as Kyosuke noticed numerous eyes watching them on their way, a situation usually handled by Magi. The opponents were unaware of the severity of the problem. So while Magi dealt with them, Kyosuke and others chose to eat and wait. After waiting all afternoon, Kano and Fugiura wanted to investigate, with Kyosuke's permission. Kyosuke also sent Hinomiya to scout. As Hinomiya walked into the alley, his senses suddenly disappeared, and a dead body fell from above. He realized he could no longer speak because of the man who had just left. Fugiura has the ability to emit ultrasonic waves, which can block everything around him. For someone immune to superpowers like Hinomiya, even a headache is mild. Magi, with Fugiura's cover, eliminated the enemy. Kano took out her opponent with a single slap, and even mocked them afterward, frightening Hinomiya. However, that evening, Kyosuke finally met with the contact for the transaction. Although it seemed a normal trade, Hinomiya was positioned in a high-rise nearby, ready to eliminate the contact on Kyosuke's signal. Kyosuke had long suspected the thugs they encountered on their journey were the contact's men. Betrayal among superpowered individuals meant death, hence Hinomiya's assignment. To Hinomiya, this felt like being under suspicion, but to clear his name, he had to follow Kyosuke's orders. Over half a century ago, Kyosuke and this old man were comrades in arms. They first met in 1942 when they were the same age. However, Kyosuke, using his superpowers to control aging genes, became immortal. Hinomiya, as an investigator, had researched Kyosuke, which meant Kyosuke was actually over 100 years old. At that moment, Kyosuke gave the signal, a sigh, which Hinomiya could clearly see through his sniper scope. Yet, he hesitated. As a justice-seeking investigator, he couldn't accept killing indiscriminately. But as he hesitated, Kyosuke openly confronted the situation, and the trade contact began shooting at Kyosuke indiscriminately. Kyosuke had done this on purpose. Hinomiya's position was right above the trade contact's rooftop. The enemies they had just defeated were merely the contact's clones. The contact was a high-level superpower holder who planned to eliminate Kyosuke from afar. However, he didn't anticipate Hinomiya's presence above him, which prevented him from using his powers. Then, a showdown between two superpowered individuals occurred. Kyosuke waved his hand, destroying the entire city, then withdrew his power and left, leaving only a shocked Hinomiya. Hinomiya couldn't understand what had happened. For a moment, he doubted whether he had infiltrated their lair or led himself into death. In Hinomiya's eyes, these people seemed optimistic and harmless, yet they were decisive killers behind the scenes. This organization, called P.A.N.D.R.A, was not as simple as it seemed, especially Kyosuke. Not only did he appear invincible, but Hinomiya even felt that Kyosuke could read his mind. Meanwhile, the upper echelons had sent 2 more investigators. He is the most invincible protagonist I've ever seen. A simple pat on the shoulder can calm a berserk girl, and a mere gesture can make enemies surrender. He possesses divine-like power, but often seals it away. In this world, 20% of the people have superpowers, but only 1% are of high level. While Kyosuke appears harmless, he is actually a supreme criminal. Why is Kyosuke considered a criminal? Recently, a princess held a banquet themed around peace among superpowered individuals. However, 2 inexperienced investigators discovered Kyosuke there. Unbeknownst to Sakaki, the princess had invited Kyosuke, not realizing it was all his plot. At the same time, the princess disappeared. Considering everyone present had superhuman abilities, it seemed impossible for someone to kidnap her right under their noses. Meanwhile, the 2 investigators reported to their superiors, suspecting only Kyosuke could pull off such a feat. Just then, a video was sent showing that the P.A.N.D.R.A organization claimed responsibility for the kidnapping. Sakaki then produced a USB drive. He had secretly taken it from Kyosuke during a conversation, thinking it might be the only clue to rescue the princess. They began their investigation, but Kyosuke had seen everything. The theft of the USB drive was also part of his plan. Right now, in a dimly lit room, the princess slowly opened her eyes. Maji explained that they would not harm her. Hinomiya, captivated by the princess's beauty, watched her. However, the princess eventually voiced her concerns about why she was kidnapped. Kyosuke's response left her puzzled. It turned out that Yugiri, who can read minds and sense murderous intent nearby, was the mastermind behind the kidnapping. During the banquet, Yugiri felt someone would attempt to assassinate the princess and asked Kyosuke for help. Meanwhile, the rookie investigators were analyzing the USB drive taken from Kyosuke. To their surprise, it contained a game. Thinking this was typical of Kyosuke, they started playing the game. Kyosuke was already aware of the real perpetrator behind the assassination attempt, but his true aim was not to eliminate the enemy, but for Yugiri. Long ago, when Yugiri was an orphan, the princess had taken her in. They parted ways due to certain events, and Yugiri wanted to protect the princess. Kyosuke decided to let the long-separated pair cherish their reunion. At that moment, the princess requested to go shopping with Yugiri despite being kidnapped. This did not deter Kyosuke. Suddenly, countless duplicates of Princess Sophia appeared throughout the city. The investigators and their superiors were shocked by this scene, a result of Kyosuke's hypnotic superpowers. Meanwhile, those who wanted to harm the princess became desperate, unable to determine the real princess's location. While the real princess and Yugiri were leisurely wandering around, Hinomiya was accompanying and protecting them. Hinomiya is immune to superpowers, so Kyosuke's illusions did not affect him. However, after analyzing the enemies, Kyosuke realized that they were just a typical anti-superpower group with someone else behind them. Although transactions were conducted online, the mastermind was about to be exposed. This was because the 2 rookie investigators finally completed the game. When they looked at the real contents of the USB drive, they saw the tax details of various departments. The senior officials quickly shut down the computer screen as the information was confidential. By evening, the princess and Yugiri had been out all day, and Hinomiya was somewhat tired. Just then, someone suddenly appeared before them. But as the princess was explaining, Yugiri completely lost control, and it seemed like a massacre was about to occur. Fortunately, Kyosuke appeared in time and stopped everything. In summary, the enemy was successfully neutralized. The princess thanked Kyosuke and had considered keeping Yugiri by her side. However, it now seemed that Kyosuke was the more suitable choice. Kyosuke's headquarters were suddenly attacked by enemies. Everyone on this ship possessed superhuman abilities. 3 girls treated like combat machines were deployed on board, and those with insufficient abilities were defeated. Although Kyosuke seemed calm, he was startled by a figure in the sky, a girl floating in the air. Kyosuke instantly teleported to confront her. Deep inside the ship, Hinomiya began reporting to the leadership. He had been undercover at Kyosuke's for some time without completing his mission. There was a crucial device deep within the ship, significant enough that substantial funds had been invested in the mission. As a fast-tracked officer, Hinomiya could not afford to fail. Realizing this, he started searching the ship. However, as he opened a door, he found only corridors leading to more corridors. Then he heard voices behind him, Fugiura and Yugiri questioning why Hinomiya was there without a pass. Suddenly, the headquarters started shaking, signaling the enemy's attack. As Fugiura prepared to fight with Hinomiya, Yugiri stopped him and lent him a superpowered hamster. Inside the ship, one by one, his colleagues fell. Kano noticed a problem. Everyone was a superpower holder, yet only 3 enemies were overpowering them. While she found it unbelievable, the enemy leader demanded their surrender. Kyosuke and Queen were evenly matched in their fight, but he wasn't using his full strength. Although it seemed he was fleeing in disarray, he was actually just mocking his opponent. Meanwhile, Hinomiya encountered another adversary who looked like a middle school student, but was merciless. However, Hinomiya easily handled them since he could disable the abilities of enemies within 5 meters. Previously, Kyosuke had placed a limiter around his neck, which he could release during a fight. After doing so, he controlled the girl, but he didn't realize there was more than one enemy. Queen also noticed the situation. She was waiting for a chance to end the battle. She knew Kyosuke was out of her league. The 2 girls were crucial to her plan to defeat her opponents. When they couldn't use Mind Search on Hinomiya, they started researching the hamster. Eventually, they found a toy identical to one Kyosuke had, which was the passkey. This allowed them to access the ship's server. Hinomiya, now useless to them, was left behind. Queen hurried away, leaving Kyosuke standing there. However, he quickly returned to the ship and learned the situation. The headquarters had been steered off its original course, and many of his people had been taken. Kyosuke was preparing to infiltrate the enemy ranks when Hinomiya suddenly grabbed him, and they teleported together to the enemy headquarters. Meanwhile, Kyosuke's ship began to counterattack. The enemy had only seized control of the ship's navigation, but its tracking missiles were still operational. The enemy soon discovered Kyosuke and Hinomiya's location, prompting an immediate counterattack, even deploying psychics to surround them. Hinomiya became their primary target, and unable to overpower them, he had to flee. However, as he fled, he was lucky. A missile from his ship struck near him, temporarily disabling the psychic's abilities. Hinomiya seized this opportunity to fight back. After defeating the enemies, he stepped on a remote control that could command the ship, easily resolving the control issue. Now the new problem was how to escape, especially since Kyosuke's whereabouts were unknown. With no other options, Hinomiya jumped into the sea. Suddenly, Kyosuke appeared and took him flying. It turned out Kyosuke had been sabotaging the enemy's internal systems. Now, they just needed to escape smoothly. However, the enemy, including Queen and 2 other girls, wouldn't let them. They combined forces and launched a devastating attack toward Kyosuke's location. Seeing this, Kyosuke finally stopped holding back and unleashed his full power. Kyousuke founded the P.A.N.D.R.A organization not to oppose the world, but to gather all the psychics shunned by society and create a city exclusive to those with superpowers. Queen is crucial to achieving this goal. Kyosuke plans to reclaim her one day, but not now. Their real adversaries aren't ordinary people, and there's no point in completely annihilating them. The investigators weren't surprised that Kyosuke fled. However, they were concerned about a discovered prophecy of a disaster linked to Kyosuke's future. Despite his rebellion, one investigator knew that Kyosuke's actions were intended to benefit humanity. The girl has a condition where she loses control if touched by a stranger. If she senses danger, this passive skill activates, making getting close to her lethal. However, There is one exception, a man whose ability can neutralize superpowers. Why did things come to this point? Just recently, after his ship was attacked, Kyosuke went to another city for repairs. Being centuries old, he has connections everywhere. Meanwhile, his companions leisurely roamed the bustling city. Despite their invincibility to ordinary people, the vibrant city still offered them new sights. Yugiri felt joy when she saw things she liked, but would run away from things she disliked. Seeing this, Magi ordered Hinomiya to follow her closely, because Yugiri's powers were extremely dangerous, and Hinomiya could neutralize them. Lost in the crowd, Yugiri spotted some gift boxes for sale, but realized she had no money. Just then, Hinomiya's voice reached her, and she felt like she had seen a savior. However, after paying, Hinomiya felt uneasy, not because the items were expensive, but because they now couldn't find their way back home, thanks to Yugiri's random wandering. Meanwhile, in a hospital, Kyosuke disguised himself as a doctor and infiltrated the facility for a health check. Using his psychic abilities, he conducted the examination alone, only to confirm his fear. He had only 1 year left to live. Elsewhere, Hinomiya and Yugiri were at an amusement park watching a show. Hinomiya excused himself to buy drinks, leaving Yugiri alone. Unbeknownst to them, 2 investigators were watching. Hinomiya, aware of being followed, discovered that his pursuer was also an investigator. The investigator approached Hinomiya to propose a collaboration to bring down the organization from within. If Hinomiya refused, they would inform Kyosuke of a traitor in the ranks, making his position in the organization untenable. This presented an ideal opportunity for collaboration. Long ago, Kyosuke had eliminated everyone involved in a betrayal by a superior officer, including the early members of Babel, an organization built to protect psychics. His actions were driven by revenge, and he concluded that ordinary people couldn't be trusted to protect psychics. Hinomiya found this hard to accept, but it appeared to be the truth. Although he had been placed by his superiors to infiltrate Kyosuke's circle, Hinomiya, having interacted with Kyosuke, didn't believe him to be a mindless killer, causing him to hesitate. Meanwhile, Yugiri noticed a child crying in a corner, having lost his parents. She used her psychic powers to telepathically search for the child's parents. Humans have always feared those with superpowers. Yugiri felt disappointed once again. Although she had helped, she was not welcomed. The people around witnessed the recent incident. Everyone viewed her as a threat. Some even called security. After everything ended, Hinomiya noticed that people still looked at him strangely. Fortunately, he didn't care. His companions rushed over, but found Yugiri in Hinomiya's arms, making them think he was a lolicon. Once Magi understood the situation, she asked Hinomiya to unlock the limiter around his neck, because he couldn't teleport anymore. The limiter was crucial for blocking Hinomiya's powers. Meanwhile, as they were leaving, Queen noticed something amiss in the classroom. It seemed Kyosuke had been there. Kyosuke, who had deep feelings for Queen, used his energy to be near her, just to see her. By evening, everyone returned home, exhausted. Kano then told Hinomiya a secret story. When she was very young, her hometown was overwhelmed by war and her parents died. A helicopter targeted her because survivors of bombings were often superpowered. Just then, Kyosuke appeared. From that day, Kyosuke saved them all, aiming to create a world of peace for superpowered individuals. Hundreds of superpowered people now followed him. Hearing this, Hinomiya was unsure whether Kyosuke was good or bad. In the city overrun with superpowers, Hinomiya could neither be a regular person nor a full superpowered being, due to his mediocre ability. His power could only make people within a few meters lose their strength, but he was vulnerable to long-range attacks. Despite his dissatisfaction, he left the army. However, he met a man who would change his life, a detective from the Confederation. From that day, Hinomiya was assigned to spy on Kyosuke's ship, aiming to seize its core, the I-8. Meanwhile, Kyosuke was planning his next mission. A company named Gurahamu developed something called ECM, costing billions, intended for Country H. The mission was to intercept it. Fujiwara suggested destroying it outright, but Magi disagreed, believing it could be useful. Watching everyone struggle, Hinomiya wondered if completing his task could prevent their deaths, as he had grown attached to them. Kyosuke explained that after this job, they would leave the city forever, an important piece of intelligence. Unbeknownst to Hinomiya, Kyosuke had seen through him. The mission was set for the day after tomorrow, allowing some rest beforehand. After leaving, Hinomiya sought Kano to inquire about Kyosuke, who allegedly planned to kill all humans except superpowered individuals. Kano suggested asking Kyosuke directly, especially since Kyosuke personally provided Hinomiya with a limiter, indicating his fondness for him. At night, Hinomiya was telling Yugiri a story to put her to sleep. However, as he was about to leave, the hamster told him that the book needed to be returned to the library. He immediately went there, and upon returning the book, noticed a photo left inside. The photo showed a young Kyosuke and Queen, indicating that Queen had also lived for hundreds of years. Just then, Kyosuke entered the room. Hinomiya quickly hid, while Kyosuke casually opened a book, summoning a spirit beside him. The spirit was surprised to appear there. It turned out Kyosuke had stored the spirit's consciousness in the book long ago, a method to keep the deceased alive. Kyosuke summoned the man because the ship, powered by the brain of the deceased, I-8, had predictive and telepathic abilities, as well as computational speeds beyond human reach, enabling spatial movement and flight. The ship's functions were enabled by integrating the crew's brainwaves. Kyosuke's next words surprised the spirit. In the event of his death, Kyosuke hoped the spirit would protect the ship and its crew. Suddenly, the spirit sensed movement, but found nothing after checking, leading Kyosuke to suggest it might have been a rat. He then picked up Hinomiya's limiter. Breathless, Hinomiya ran out of the library, only to discover his limiter was gone, reminding him of the days before he became a spy. Hinomiya decided to reclaim I-8 and planned to carry out the mission tomorrow. His superiors agreed to have other investigators stall Kyosuke. The next day, Kyosuke and 4 others set off. Thanks to the ship's ability to travel through time and space, they reached their destination without obstacles. The ECM was being transported by multiple vehicles. The mission seemed straightforward. Fujiwara would use his powers to stop the vehicles, and then they would swiftly seize the ECM. Magi also thought the mission would be completed easily. However, they were unaware that the investigators had been waiting for them for a long time, and all the people in those vehicles were actually police officers. It was undoubtedly a trap. Kyosuke was curious about how his plan was discovered, but he had no time to think further as he sensed Queen's presence, and instructed Magi to handle the officers while he confronted Queen in the sky.
予知変動レベル予測不能。バベルの予知家はそう言ってる。
それに船にはまだ仲間たちがいる。彼らは放っといていいのかな。なぜこうも忌々しく、そしてやすやすとエスパーたちの心を乱すんだろう。させてもらう。
After dealing with Queen, Kyosuke unexpectedly felt a pain in his heart, indicating his life was ebbing away. Meanwhile, Hinomiya ran back to the ship. As he was heading towards I-8, he encountered Yugiri in a corner. He explained that he had returned because he was weak. The innocent Yugiri did not suspect anything and went back to sleep after their brief interaction. Finally, Hinomiya reached the central part of the ship. Before reclaiming I-8, he needed to report to his superiors. He discovered that the ship housed many ordinary people, including many children, all superpowered but naive and good-hearted. He hoped for leniency for them after the mission. Just as he was prepared to reclaim I-8, Kyosuke entered the room.
君ごときには渡さない。お前、俺の正体を認めたくはないが、君の目はどこか思い出させるのさ。君はここで死ぬから。
This is the strongest protagonist I've ever seen, born with superhuman strength. Kyosuke's father always instructed him to hide his powers, and live like an ordinary person. Shortly after his father's death, Kyosuke left home for the Empire. There, Baron Tsubomi, his father's old friend, welcomed him and introduced him to his daughter, Fujiko, who immediately saw Kyosuke as a younger brother. Fujiko, like Kyosuke, is a psychokinesis user. Back at his place, Kyosuke wrote daily letters to his deceased father, a way to comfort himself. Today, Fujiko discovered his secret letter writing. While they were arguing, Baron Tsubomi, accompanied by 2 soldiers, appeared at the door, intending to recruit Kyosuke and Fujiko to fight for the country as weapons. At that moment, Fujiko fiercely objected, refusing to be a so-called war machine, even against her father's coercion. Young Kyosuke was unsure what to do. That night, back in his room, Kyosuke looked up at the ceiling.
お父さんが捨てろと言ったこの力をそれでも求めてくれる人がいるなら
女の私が男性に頼らず生きていく道私は誰にも負けたくない
The next day, the two met as they left the house. Seeing Kyosuke, Fujiko made up her mind. Indeed, they decided to join the organization. Time flew by, and it had been a year since Kyosuke and Fujiko joined. Today, they were set to watch a promotional film at the cinema, showcasing the role and capabilities of psychokinetic weapons. However, the film still portrayed them as monsters, which Kyosuke and Fujiko noticed. The following scenes featured Kyosuke and Fujiko's teammates, some of whom could teleport, while others could manipulate lightning. After the film, Fujiko left angrily, not expecting to soon cause even bigger trouble. As Kyosuke exited the cinema, he accidentally bumped into a security guard who immediately scolded him upon seeing his attire. Previously, Fujiko had advised him against wearing a military uniform, as it was not customary for men to dress flamboyantly. Just as the guard was about to reprimand Kyosuke, Fujiko came over, unwilling to see her brother being mistreated. However, it turned out the guard was a naval officer, leading to all members of their organization being confined due to associated responsibility. The captain knew this was the army deliberately provoking them, as establishing a military organization of ESPers could unsettle some. Baron Tsubomi realized that handling this situation would require his daughter, Fujiko, to publicly apologize. However, Kyosuke overheard this conversation and realized Fujiko did not want to apologize, believing she had done nothing wrong. The next morning, the captain was explaining the situation to the leaders. The unified response from the leaders was that the Psychic Special Services had made a severe mistake, and that these monsters must train like ordinary people going forward. Upon hearing this, the captain argued it was a waste of talent, pointing out that neighboring country H was already ahead. To not lose in combat, it was essential to utilize these ESPers effectively. However, their conversation was overheard by members of the Psychic Special Services. The men knew that the Navy's protests were just a facade. In reality, they disliked having these monsters among them. Meanwhile, the captain, seeking a lifeline for his organization, proposed an unexpected solution: to have the Psychic Special Services fight a battle against the Navy. The captain had heard that the other side had developed a powerful new fighter jet, the A6M1. Since childhood, Kyosuke's father had told him to hide his true power, mentioning that his mother also died because her strength was too great. However, hundreds of years after his father's death, Kyosuke not only survived but became a god in this world. The transformation into such a being stemmed from when Kyosuke was just 8 years old, as the world's Psychic Special Services took interest in his abilities and recruited him. Today, Kyosuke was arranged to fight alone against a fighter jet. Though unsure why his superior had arranged this, Kyosuke accepted the task. This fight was crucial, determining the stay of everyone in the team, and was closely watched by all. During the battle, Kyosuke was pursued by his opponent, and everyone believed he was bound to lose. However, someone recalled Kyosuke's words that any ordinary person could end it with a single shot. Despite this, Kyosuke's situation looked grim, as he was continuously attacked by the fighter jet in the air, forced into defensive maneuvers. To make matters worse, Kyosuke found his body becoming incredibly heavy, as if bound by an unknown force. Yet, the superior indicated that all of this was to unleash Kyosuke's true power. The hidden strength would be fully released under this pressure. As he was struck passively, Kyosuke had no idea how to retaliate.
お前の母親のように。
能力者なんだ。それが僕なんだよ。僕は僕でいることをやめたくない。
While thinking of his father, Kyosuke also remembered what his superior had told him. Psychic powers are a special gift from the gods. Since they were bestowed by the gods, there must inherently be a purpose for using them. With this realization, Kyosuke fully awakened. The fighter jet trailing him could no longer keep up. Now, he was ready to defeat his opponent. A massive submarine appeared in the nearby waters, chasing something. Enemy firepower prevented anyone from approaching. They quickly reported the situation to their superior, who instructed them not to act rashly. The primary concern was the object the submarine was pursuing. At that moment, Kyosuke spotted something emerging from the sea. It was 3 dolphins, oddly marked with numbers on their fins. These dolphins were also psychics and sought help from Kyosuke's team. The submarine chasing the dolphins suddenly fired torpedoes. After an explosion, 1 dolphin was killed on the spot, and the remaining 2 were targeted by other torpedoes. In a critical moment, Kyosuke rushed into the sea and protected the dolphins from the attack. After the incident, the previous submarine fled the scene, and the 2 dolphins survived. During their evacuation, 1 dolphin expressed gratitude but noted that, compared to marine life, psychics like them were closer to death. It ominously added that everyone would soon die, as over 10 years had passed. Kyosuke had grown up, and their country had been thoroughly defeated by the enemy. The superior told Kyosuke they could only surrender unconditionally. He then pointed to an unidentified object, revealing it to be the brain of a psychic dolphin, capable of foreseeing the future. One critical prophecy was that Kyosuke would become the leader of countless psychics and destroy the world. Shocked, Kyosuke listened as the superior, too tired to explain further, aimed a gun at his head, declaring that no third person must know he had raised a monster.
君は人類の敵になどしない。敵？化け物？バカな！化け物なのか？
Although Kyosuke possessed godlike strength, he was still no match for humanity because they feared his abilities and deployed modern super weapons against him. Ultimately, Kyosuke fell unwillingly. However, at this critical moment, a man suddenly appeared and saved Kyosuke. Just moments before, Kyosuke had discovered a significant secret on the ship. The man named Hinomiya was actually an undercover investigator on the ship, aiming to seize its core, I-8. The I-8 had the ability to predict the future. Before Kyosuke could act again, Hinomiya disabled the I-8's psychic powers, rendering the ship visible to everyone. The enemy, receiving the signal, confirmed the start of their operation and dispatched numerous unmanned fighter jets to Kyosuke's location. Hinomiya had not anticipated that these jets would actually attack the ship, especially since his superiors had said they would not engage. Seeing this, Kyosuke, furious, lost all trust in humanity and teleported to the battlefield, wanting to clear the trash, despite his curiosity about who was behind all this. Meanwhile, the reserve troops watching secretly began to move, using the drones to distract Kyosuke while they invaded the ship. The ship was full of innocent people, mostly children, but the soldiers showed no mercy. At the same time, Kyosuke's men spotted the invaders. Although they could easily handle them, their main concern was for the vulnerable children. After waking up, Yugiri started searching for Kyosuke, but only heard a huge explosion. To calm her down, a hamster promised to find Kyosuke for her. At that moment, an invading investigator discovered Yugiri. After capturing her, someone used ultraviolet light to examine special marks on her neck, proving Yugiri's psychic abilities. Confirming this, Hinomiya's superior ordered his subordinates to target Yugiri with an ECM device that suppresses psychic powers. Meanwhile, Hinomiya successfully retrieved the core I-8, but was attacked during transport by the same hamster that had gone to find Kyosuke. The hamster realized Hinomiya had betrayed them, but its small size and powers were weak against the soldiers. Hinomiya then met with his superior, who seemed to have someone tied up behind him. It was Yugiri. Hinomiya had previously agreed with his superior not to harm the children on the ship after completing the mission. But his superior broke the promise, claiming everyone on the ship was a monster. Seeing the truth, Hinomiya grabbed a soldier's pistol and aimed it at his superior. Having spent time with Yugiri, Hinomiya knew she would never harm humans, but his realization was met with his superior's disdain. Meanwhile, Kyosuke, despite his formidable strength, was already exhausted. Worse still, a helicopter was stealthily attacking from directly above the ship. Fortunately, Magi arrived in time to save the children. The ship was continuously attacked, and the number of injured on board kept rising. The situation could not get any worse. The humans showed no mercy towards those with psychic powers. Seeing this, Kyosuke was completely at a loss. Normally proud and unbeatable, he now looked utterly discomposed. At that moment, Maji suddenly snapped Kyosuke out of it. Now, only Kyosuke could protect the ship. These words reminded him of his duty. As Kyosuke persevered, others began to retreat, taking several children and attempting to travel through time. However, they had not anticipated that the core, I-8, had already been taken, so the ship could no longer provide any capabilities. Then, a massive explosion suddenly occurred, leaving the fate of everyone on board uncertain. Hinomiya, who had been shot, also woke up. Fortunately, he was not dead. The bullet had been blocked by a limiter on his chest. Now, Kyosuke faced the enemy's multitude of modern weapons alone. If he could not withstand the attack, death was certain. Even the invincible Kyosuke had moments when his psychic powers were depleted. When Kyosuke, already an invincible force for years, learned that the villain he thought he had killed was still alive, he was not upset but excited. Meanwhile, the villain foolishly waited for Kyosuke to come for him, unaware that endless darkness awaited him. Recently, Kyosuke fell into the sea due to an accident and was near death when Hinomiya, the traitor, rescued him. Surprisingly, Kyosuke's long-lost sister Fujiko was also there. When Kyosuke woke up, he found himself in a mansion where Fujiko explained the situation. However, she had one question. Why would the Federation go to such lengths to attack Kyosuke? Kyosuke then remembered the events of the previous day. He was about to deal with the treacherous Hinomiya when a familiar voice interrupted him. The voice of his former superior, whom Kyosuke believed he had eliminated 10 years ago. Meanwhile, Hinomiya was in a hospital where doctors, after disabling his psychic powers, ordered the removal of a tracking device implanted by his boss. With the tracker removed, Hinomiya was essentially free. Yet, upon waking, his first thought was of Kyosuke. As the doctor explained the situation to Hinomiya, a girl nearby trapped the doctor and used her powers to pinpoint Kyosuke's exact location. Hinomiya and a few others then began their journey toward him. Hinomiya quickly approached Kyosuke. Just as Hinomiya was about to explain, Kyosuke interrupted, asking about the man who had previously communicated with Hinomiya. Hinomiya explained that he had met the man, an elderly man, at the beginning of his training as a spy. This man, who hoped Hinomiya would use his psychic abilities for the benefit of humanity, led an organization desiring peace. Hinomiya had joined them and was tasked with infiltrating Kyosuke's side to seize something called I-8. However, Kyosuke was not interested in this. He angrily demanded the old man's name, but Hinomiya only remembered that he was Japanese and bore scars from a past war. Everyone was shocked by this revelation. Fujiko was stunned, and Kyosuke was furious. The elderly man Hinomiya mentioned was the traitor whom Kyosuke had personally killed, and who had once tried to kill Kyosuke. Realizing this, Kyosuke passed out in anger. However, a medical check revealed that his chromosomes were affected due to the use of his psychic powers to activate telomeres for prolonged youth, leaving adverse effects. There was a remedy. A blood transfusion from Queen, who possessed similar powers, could temporarily alleviate these side effects. When Kyosuke awoke, he saw Queen beside him, seemingly helping him. At that moment, Fujiko reminded Hinomiya that she had endured joining the human organization to overthrow them one day, revealing herself, also, as a victim. During the year Kyosuke almost got killed by his superior, She had survived a military attack, though the Psychic Special Forces unit was eradicated. She hoped Hinomiya would help Kyosuke. However, that night after waking up, Kyosuke left the hospital ward determined to seek revenge against the man. By the time everyone realized, it was too late. Only Queen managed to meet him. More precisely, Kyosuke had intentionally set out to say goodbye, uncertain of his survival. Despite his invincible psychic powers, he knew he might be no match for modern human weaponry. Queen was the last person he wanted to see, and after speaking these words, Kyosuke truly left. Hinomiya witnessed all this. He hadn't expected the humans to be so ruthless, nor had he considered that the organization he served was Kyosuke's enemy. Meanwhile, in a secluded room, the old man slowly reached for the stolen central I-8. The future image of Queen then appeared in his mind, showing her and Kyosuke leading psychics to destroy the world. This vision was something he had seen years ago and was determined to prevent at all costs. At this moment, Kyosuke and Hinomiya arrived at the enemy's stronghold, seeking revenge. Unfortunately, they were only greeted by the boss's subordinates. Despite having a gun to his head, the man refused to surrender or reveal the boss's location, even contemplating suicide to keep the secret. However, Kyosuke, relentless in achieving his goals, would not let him succeed. Consequently, the man agreed to lead them to where the boss was. The organization the man belonged to had a final objective: to allow humans to manage psychics, specifically using them for biological research, even if it meant resorting to violence. Long ago, Yugiri was created by an organization, but escaped due to lax management. Upon hearing this, Hinomiya was in disbelief. Yugiri had killed numerous researchers who were equipped with modern superweapons, yet still managed to escape. What they didn't know was that Yugiri was merely a clone. In creating Yugiri, the organization had used a particularly powerful psychic as a test subject. The only way to identify these artificial beings was through a QR code on their necks. Soon, the man led Kyosuke to a room where Yugiri had been confined days earlier. However, they discovered Yugiri was no longer there. The man explained that Yugiri had still been there 2 days ago. Just then, a voice sounded. This image is quite interesting. It shows a future vision seen during the recovery of the central hub, I-8. In the future, psychic individuals will destroy human cities, and Kyosuke will be the main instigator. However, they will not sit idly by and want to change this predetermined future. Importantly, a woman will play a similar role to Kyosuke, and this woman is Queen, whom Kyosuke constantly thinks about. The opponent claims that everyone, including Queen, will be killed. Suddenly, numerous small fighter jets burst into the room. The man quickly hugged Kyosuke, but such a small effort could not achieve their goal. He then saved Hinomiya. However, Kyosuke was slightly injured due to his life force draining. The man just died on the spot. Afterward, Kyosuke and Hinomiya ran to an elevator. There were many unmanned fighter jets here. Kyosuke did not want to waste his strength prematurely. He transformed the elevator's handrails into a katana, and Hinomiya, armed with a baton, charged at the fighter jets. He took charge of clearing the path ahead, while Kyosuke cleaned up behind. Soon, they reached the roof, where Kyosuke could teleport away. However, a special device emitted gold foil strips, developed specifically to counter Kyosuke's teleportation ability. This meant they had to deal with all the fighter jets before they could leave. Kyosuke considered removing his power limit, but Hinomiya stopped him and said he would hold them off alone. For a moment, they were unsure of what to do. Fortunately, Kyosuke's subordinates arrived just in time. The rescued duo then boarded another submarine brought by the subordinates, where the mayoral election was being broadcasted. The candidate was promising coexistence between psychics and humans, echoing the words of a man from over a decade ago. This suggested that the ultimate boss might be there. Kyosuke immediately decided to go. Meanwhile, in the city, Yugiri stood alone on a rooftop overlooking humans, but she was just another clone. Fujiko also arrived at the scene. Upon learning of the situation, Kyosuke was ready to act, but his subordinates volunteered, as they also did not want Kyosuke to waste his strength here. This is an absolutely fantastic segment from Zettai Karen Children. Kyosuke, previously dominant, is finally on the brink of losing control. Even the limiter that could restrict his power is shattered. If Kyosuke is not stopped, the entire city will be destroyed. Yugiri is the catalyst for this event, but Hinomiya fails to catch her in time. It turns out a mayoral election ceremony is taking place here. Yugiri arrives and looks down on everyone from above. However, upon seeing the mayor, she intends to kill him. Hinomiya intercepts the attack. It turns out that since the villainous old man took Yugiri, he has controlled her using special methods to incite a war between psychics and ordinary people. The mayor is a key pawn in this plan. The old villain uses Yugiri to change the future, planning to eliminate the queen, who could lead psychics to destroy the world, today. Just then, the old man spots Kyosuke. The controlled Yugiri immediately attacks Kyosuke, but he easily blocks it and learns of her psychic ability. Yugiri can not only trigger uncontrollable outbursts of psychic power, but can also control actions and behavior. Kyosuke, believing himself immune to such attacks, sees another version of himself. Despite his reluctance to admit it, he too is affected. Soon, Kyosuke starts fighting this other self. As he prepares to quickly finish off his opponent, the adversary vanishes, replaced by an old helicopter from many years ago. However, after successfully downing the helicopter, a former comrade suddenly attacks him, and even his father's voice echoes in his ears. Despite knowing these are illusions, Kyosuke is deeply affected. Kyosuke couldn't take it anymore and made a decision. He decided to unleash all his power, causing the illusions around him to dissipate. Yugiri was startled by this, revealing her tragic past. She had been used as a research subject years ago, and the misuse of her powers by scientists led to her losing control, killing everyone present at the time. Since then, Yugiri has moved from city to city, meeting many people. To avoid harming those who cared about her, she would leave after staying a while. That was until she met Kyosuke, whose powers were so great that he didn't need to fear her and even made her his partner. When Hinomiya arrived, he witnessed an unbelievable scene. Kyosuke was desperately trying to suppress Yugiri's powers. Yugiri regained some consciousness, and Kyosuke helped remove a special mark from her neck. However, this act caused Kyosuke to begin losing control himself, as the factor in his body that suppressed his power was gone, a consequence of constantly pushing himself. Each use of his power cost him his life, indicating that he would die today. It was unclear how many others in the city might die as a result. At that moment, the limiter shattered, suggesting that Kyosuke was the ultimate target. Despite their intense pain, Hinomiya and Yugiri moved closer to Kyosuke. Hinomiya's ability could neutralize psychic powers, but its effectiveness varied with the strength of the power. Yet what happened next was something Kyosuke never expected. Kyosuke found it incredible that his powers had been neutralized. Even more impressive was Hinomiya. Meanwhile, the young queen seemed to understand everything that was happening as she looked up at the sky. The drama ended with the villainous old man failing to achieve his goals. However, Kyosuke was not ready to let him go. The old man expressed a desire to die at Kyosuke's hands. Yet Kyosuke, facing the man who had once betrayed him, chose not to end his life, but to judge him in another way. With that, everything truly ended. Waking up, Hinomiya decided to leave the P.A.N.D.R.A organization, intending to survive in a different way. The future where Queen and Kyosuke would destroy the world remained unchanged. However, just as he was leaving, he encountered Kyosuke again. Hinomiya took out the limiter Kyosuke had once given him, but Kyosuke handed it back, allowing him to leave as an elder of the P.A.N.D.R.A organization. After Hinomiya's departure, a new journey began.